So the next question says, why is the automobile industry considered an oligopoly? One, it offers little differentiation within the market. Two, it has significant barriers to entry. Three, it is controlled by companies that patent key technology. Four, it relies on price variation to attract customers. Five, it depends on brand loyalty and images to generate sales. And six, it is dominated by a few key players. And so it's looking like that this is a question with maybe multiple answers that we have to check off. So why don't we go over them one by one? So number one says it offers little differentiation within the market. And so that's not necessarily the case, both in terms of an oligopoly and in terms of the automobile industry, right? So for an oligopoly, it's possible for there to be a little bit this. It's possible for there to be a decent amount of differentiation between the products, and that's why there are multiple different kind of key players that are dominating this industry rather than a single key player or rather than many key players, right? Because if you have many key players, then everybody's going to have the exact same product and there's going to be little ability for competition to exist, right? Sorry, if everybody's the same product, there's going to be a lot of ability for competition to exist, right? So it's possible for it to be some degree of differentiation. So it's not one is not going to be one of the ones that we check off as correct. Two says it has significant barriers to entry. And so this is going to be the case both for oligopoly and for automobile industries. In oligopolies, we see that if there's only a few key players, it's possible that it takes a significant amount of upfront capital or other kind of significant barriers to kind of enter this industry. And in the automobile industry specifically, we know that, it costs a ton of money to design a car. It costs even more money to build the infrastructure and factory and capital necessary to build a lot of those cars. And so nobody is really able to one day just be like, I'm going to start the next big car company, right? There's a lot of large barriers in which you have to overcome those barriers in order to enter this industry. So two is something that we're going to check off as, yes, a reason why the automobile industry is considered an oligopoly. Three says it is controlled by companies that patent key technology. So this isn't really true in the automobile industry. It could be true in an oligopoly, but it isn't true in the automobile industry. We don't really see that it's the problem for getting into automobile manufacturing is a result of patents. The real problem is in the form of the capital required and the investment required in that infrastructure. So three isn't going to be correct. Four says it relies on price variation to attract customers. And so this is going to be something that isn't really happening in oligopolies. We don't see, and in the automobile industry, we don't see necessarily that the reason we buy from certain car companies over other car companies is primarily because of price variation, right? Whether it be it's more expensive or more cheap, that there are other things that differentiate these products that don't have to rely on price indicators. When we would see price variation is if we had a set of products from these companies that are almost identical, and then you would be using price variation as indicators of quality. And so if that's the case, then we might see price variation. But because automobiles are able to be differentiated, we can think of brands like Mercedes versus Honda versus Toyota. There's also kind of traits of cars that align with each of those separate brands. And so, that there's less of a need for that price variation to attract customers. So we're not going to pick four. Five says it depends on brand loyalty and image to generate sales. And this is the case that a lot of the times, because oligopoly firms are kind of in this game theory situation where they're all interdependent, the way for firms to build a customer base is through brand loyalty and images in advertisements and marketing. And so we'll see that in both the automobile industry and in oligopolies that firms are going to invest a lot in those types of approaches towards increasing customer demand. So 5 is going to be something that we would consider to be correct. And 6 says it is dominated by a few key players, and this is really key for what an oligopoly is at its core, and it is true as well for the automobile industry. You'll find that a lot of car companies are owned by the same few. Not car companies. A lot of car brands are owned by the same few car companies. I think Volkswagen owns like 8 to 10 different brands in the car industry. So there are only a few major players that are at play in the automobile industry, and that's one of the hallmark features of an oligopoly. So we would mark that as correct as well. So I believe that the 3 that we've marked out of the 6 as reasons why the automobile industry would be considered an oligopoly are 2, it has significant barriers to entry. 5, it depends on brand loyalty and image to generate sales. And 6, it is dominated by a few key players. So let's take a look at what the previous tutor said. The previous tutor said 5, it depends on brand loyalty and image to generate sales. 6, it is dominated by a few key players. And 2, it has significant barriers to entry. So that's great. So we've got the same stuff. So let's take a look at what the previous tutor wrote in terms of their rationale. They wrote that an oligopolistic industry is the one that is dominated by a small number of large manufacturing suppliers with relevant market shares each that grants them significant bargaining power over consumers and market supply. The firms operating this market type are large and capable of influencing the market with their actions. The scale operations of incumbent firms makes it hard for potential firms to penetrate the market. Since all firms are big in terms of market share and revenue earned, they become strategically interdependent. Any price cut action to poach into the market share of others induces competitors to follow, leading to price wars that damage all firms in the long run. It's observed as firms will choose to incur short-term losses rather than losing their market share to competitors in the long run. This implication discourages price competition, and hence, firms engage in price competition that thrives on brand building and advertisements. Firms depend on brand loyalty images to generate sales. So I think that covers all 3 reasons that we talked about. There's some minor grammatical issues. We'll say minor grammar issues, but all the answers are adequately discussed. But other than that, I think it goes over the key things that we talked about as well. And we can move on to the next question.